Hello there, and look at me. I finally recorded an actual Save the World video. More yapping as well, and this time it's gonna be a guide to completing Survive the Horde. This mode got introduced back in 2023 with a bunch of bugs here and there, and now this year they refined it and for sure they made it difficult. You can't one-shot the pillars with a xenon bow anymore. Apparently it was a bug by instantly breaking the pillars very quickly, so yeah. There are 4 new modifiers after the 8th week, of course, new quest rewards, which are the new sprays and stuff like that, and that's about it. Just added modifiers and cosmetics, but I'm still doing this guide anyways because I can tell some of you guys had a hard time. We'll be talking about the wave chart, building aspect, and like loadouts and weapons that you can use whatsoever. So let us start with the wave chart to give you guys all the details on what has changed from last year. Now that I've seen other wave charts that made by like the Redditors last year, they are unfortunately outdated. So I decided to make one on my own throughout my experiences with how I got to play the Horde mode. This is all from my solo experiences, or perhaps some of the runs I had as with the squad. As of recording this video, I am still updating the chart so that the information is accurate, but I can still show it here on the screen, and I'll link the sheet in the description. Okay, for this chart, it shows how many waves are there in the match, what modifiers you're gonna have to deal with in some waves, all the mobs, and so on. This is just a tier 1 difficulty, by the way. It is also focused on the highest power level, of course, which is the 140, so you'd know what power level they are in each wave. I'm pretty sure it's different than the lower power level Horde matches, but we're focusing on the max one right here. We used to have like 4 pillar waves, now it's like 3, which is pretty okay to be honest. You don't one-shot those things with a xenon bow anymore, but we'll get to the best weapons to use against those things later on in the video. Feel free to pause whenever you want to memorize the chart, or you can just check out the sheet to see it in full display. Again, some of the intel could change in that, so that should be all for the wave details. Just be careful with the flingers, they throw pretty good in this horde mode, and as well as the smashers, they are very crazy too. Alright, so for the building aspect, we have 3 objectives that are placed in 3 different areas. They've just added a new place for the 4th, which is in the southwest area where half of it is lava, and honestly it's not a bad place to build fully there, but it will still say we have to defend 3, so the game will pick 3 out of 4 places for you to build around. Okay, when I did my first solo run in the 140, it's almost the same as last year. They've did added a little complexity around certain areas compared to last year, so that players could probably build it a little different rather than a basic retrieve the data build on a flat land. It does get a little tricky, especially when 3 objectives are in almost tight areas, so instead of doing the casual wall and ramps around the objective, I did just walls with wall spikes, similar to the initial Fortnite build, but they're full walls instead. You'll start off with sparse amount of building materials, but you'll get more if you pick up the supply drops on every breaks of the wave, or have someone with a recycling base. You can probably start there. You'll basically see some gameplay on the screen right now on how I expanded a little bit before the wave starts. As soon as you get the supply drops, you're pretty much good to go. I built it with a lot of floors placed at least 2 tiles high from the ground, literally the way I could place a crap ton of ceiling electric fields and drop traps, because that's just how lazy I am. And yeah, that's just me personally. I wouldn't recommend building yours match like how I built. You can still go for the walls and ramps the usual way. You just have to be careful giving them some roof access once flingers start spawning. Of course, shielding yourself from flingers by either adding another layer of floors and add roofs like in Fortnite, or just blanket the spawn like how I did to place some ceiling traps. I know I'm blatantly saying just build the same way you did and retrieve the data in bad areas to build around, but trust me, it's pretty different compared to last year. Flingers are more aggressive. Smashers, again, can really go crazy around the objective and whatever you can think of. it wasn't easy to solo this, but with your team, I'm sure it'll be less difficult. Before we go to the weapons section, there is a small tip I can share for anyone that are curious. I'm not sure if it's a bug or intentional, but if you don't want to bother defending all 3 objectives, you can choose to break the other 2 as soon as the wave transitions to a different objective and let the other 2 die out. That is basically the 3rd wave, which is a pillar wave, of course. Surprisingly, it doesn't affect XP or the rewards at all. You don't really get some sort of penalty for destroying the other 2. So if you just wanna stay in one place, you can break the other 2 and not get stressed out moving back and forth. You could just defend your one and only objective and spam a lot of traps and whatnot. Now, we can move on to the weapons that are best used for pillars. This will be a short section because they tweaked out the puncture of the Xenon bow and you can't one-tap those pillars anymore. Kind of an indirect reason why they had to reduce the pillar waves by 1, which we have a total of 3, and you can of course damage the pillars with almost any abilities. They kind of coded it like it's just a frozen mist monster, so it's not an environmental object. And which brings me to the first pick, the Xenon bow. Of course, it's still usable, although it may not deal as much damage anymore. It still has a projectile that can go through everything, so that'll still help out if you are running a DPS loadout in your squad. Vacuum tube bow is also another good choice for the pillars. It doesn't go through like the Xenon bow, but it hits really hard if you crit with it. As a solo, I didn't deal as much, so I can tell they're trying to encourage you to get 3 other meat shields to boost your stats in order to deal a little more damage. Next one is an explosive weapon, the Plasmatic Discharger. It can clear out pillars like crazy because of its slow but huge projectile that scatters its bolt. That is very good against big hitboxes, just like the Smashers and the Mythic Storm King himself. It is still used in the 160s to this day, so it'll do perfectly fine breaking the pillars. Okay, so this is just my personal suggestion. You usually start getting the power cells on wave 5, so my first thing to craft is the Discharger, just in case things happen to the base. But you can start off with the 2 bows if you are running a DPS or Pharah. Smashers are a little crazy this year, so I'd say this is somewhat necessary, not just for the pillars. There are other explosive weapons that does well too, since most waves are physical, and perhaps the Storm King's Wrath for like the last few waves if you need the maximum damage. Of course, the potshot is also another option. Even the bazooka could probably hit those pillars like a truck and doesn't use expensive ammo like energy cells. The last several weapons I have on my list are the fun choices. The Bundle Bus for burst damage, Ground Pounder if you are running a shotgun loadout, Double Boiler as well. It hits really hard, by the way. Oh, I haven't tried yet, but this is a good one. The Jabberwocky. Its cannons splinter on impact, so using that against those pillars could be very effective. But that's just something I thought about, so if you tried it, I hope it was alright. Okay, this part is probably not for pillars, but more of utility, and it's just from me personally, because most of my Horde runs are solo. I would honestly say, because the enemies this year are hitting harder than last year, and also their power level goes way above 211, even on tier 1. I would highly suggest a triple armor baron over a triple movement speed, unless you are running Blast from the Past, then perhaps yeah. But if your loadout, or basically you feel very squishy, I highly suggest crafting yourself a purple armor baron. Purple because it's cheaper to craft, you don't find that many power cells by the way, just so that you have a sort of reduction of the damage you take from husks. Now that the weapons are out of the way, we can move on to the loadouts that I would recommend for Survive the Horde. I'll start off with our favorite constructor base loadout. This is what I would use by the way, but in general we have base Kyle as commander for the high build health. Team perk could be recycling for more building materials, supercharged traps for more damage on any traps that are placed within the base. I have Blast from the Past here just to have a little more health for survivability. Survivalist Jonesy being my only healing output, and since you can't pick up stuff and farm, the coconut dude won't make much use, unfortunately. Ice King is also a very good choice as a lead of this loadout here if you have another teammate running base Kyle, or you want to freeze the annoying husks that keeps hitting your walls and reaching objectives easily. Next one is a DPS loadout, my favorite one out of all, and possibly a substantial hero for the insane waves of flingers and smashers. Sub-Zero Zenith on lead helps out freezing mist monsters with the usual Xenon Bow combo. You'll tag them very well and keep the waves at ease. I have Blast from the Past on the team perk for the same reason as the last loadout. You can somewhat have totally rocking out if you feel like you are not critting that much, but also tempting your fate on hard-hitting enemies, then yeah, you can use TRO. I usually have Saurian Might to deal more damage towards husks, but more importantly, the point of this loadout is to freeze mist monsters as much as possible. I'm already dealing damage anyway, so I have Instinct instead to get a little more heals. And Cupid Arrows for a little crowd clear on the initial fights. You can freely have something else around here, but this is what I would use if I were to run Zenith in a higher tier 140 Horde run. I'm honestly not sure about this, but you could say I'm wrong on this one, I don't mind. But maybe the usual Paleo Luna with Blakebeard's stash loadout could also work, since I nearly felt bad for saying the coconut dude is not helpful, but just when you need him for Blakebeard, he wouldn't be that bad after all. It is a very squishy build, I know that for sure, and I am aware of the nerf of this particular build. I have never tried this yet, but at least you can use the peg legs for the pillars and the cannonballs for crowd clearing. Like I said, I haven't tried this yet, but running melee like this one can be risky, but with a good team, maybe you'll get some health boost to stay alive a little longer with this. The last two loadouts are somewhat similar, and they're both bow builds. One that can do crowd clearing, another can do the sweeping. I'll start with another ninja build. Well, a tolerable one for sure. I have Stoneheart Farah on lead, of course. She is the queen of bows, Blast from the Past once more, and it's more reasonable because ninja heroes tend to have the lowest base health out of all the classes, so giving this loadout some more health could keep Farah alive, and everything in support is almost similar to the Zenith one. And the last one is the Chad loadout, Rabbit Raider Jonesy, the sniper crit daddy of Save the World. With him on lead with totally rocking out, you can deal a huge ton of damage against literally anything, from pillars to smashers. They won't stand a chance, even in higher tiers of difficulty. I had to put the Bomb Squad Kyle in there for just a little armor to survive, since it can be a very squishy build, but not as squishy as the ninja. It's a soldier, their base health is very high next to constructors. You can also have Blast from the Past team perk on this loadout if you don't want to be that squishy. It's kind of the reason why you can just switch out in between these two loadouts heroes. So as long as it fits you, then you are good to go. And that should be the guide to beating Survive the Horde. They definitely made it a little difficult by just changing the map terrain and having husks hit you harder. If you have any thoughts about how you run your matches in Horde mode for the wave chart, or basically wanting to add something into this, feel free to share them in the comments whenever. If you want me to record more types of these videos and feed me, make sure to use my creator code in the item shop or at the Epic Game Store. Take it easy, take care of yourself, and love yourself.